There are many useful features hidden behind the simple interface of the iPhone camera app. Today I will explain the 20 most important features and show you how to get the best possible results with your iPhone 16, 16 Plus or 16 Pro or Pro Max. I'll focus on the photo settings. For the video settings, there will be another video. You can open the camera app in different ways. Of course, by tapping the app icon. In the control center, you will find it at the lower right. From the lock screen by swiping to the left or by pressing the camera icon. And of course, there is now also the option to open the camera by pressing the camera control button. But this button can do much more than just open the camera. I'll show you all its features a little later. Let's start simple with the basic operation of the app. When you start the camera app, you will see the last image you captured in the lower left corner. In the middle there is the shutter button, and with this little circle of arrows on the right, you can switch between the back camera, which is your main camera, and the selfie camera, which is the front camera. In the line above, you can switch between the different modes. On the right, there are the 4 photo modes: photo, portrait, spatial and pano. On the left, you find the 4 video modes: video, cinematic, slow-mo and time-lapse. While photo and video are self-explanatory, you can use portrait to create a blurred background. Although this actually also works with objects, the mode is called portrait because this effect is especially well suited for portraits. With spatial, you can not only take photos, but also videos with a spatial 3D effect and then play them back on the Vision Pro. If you don't have a Vision Pro, this mode is currently useless. In panorama mode, you can capture images with a field of view that is much wider than the camera lens would actually allow. This is especially suitable for landscape photography, for example. The cinematic mode is a kind of portrait mode for video. In slow-mo mode, you can capture slow motion shots, and in time-lapse mode, the camera captures images at certain intervals, which are then merged into a video file. The result is a kind of accelerated video. This is an excellent way to capture passing clouds, for example. But as I said, today we are talking about the photo modes. Let's first have a look at the different functions of the shutter button. If you want to take a simple photo, of course you tap the shutter button briefly. You can achieve the same result by using the volume buttons. It makes no difference which of the 2 buttons you use. If you want to quickly capture several photos in a row, you can swipe the shutter button to the left. Now your iPhone will capture photos in an extremely fast sequence until you lift your finger. This is called the burst mode. This feature is often used for photographing action, but it can also help when taking portraits, for example to avoid closed eyes. You simply take several photos in quick succession and then select the best one. By the way, in the settings you can also set the burst mode to be activated by using the volume up button. This would be especially interesting if you want to use this mode frequently. If you press and hold the shutter button, the iPhone automatically starts to capture a video. The recording ends as soon as you release the shutter button. In this way, you can quickly capture a video without having to switch to video mode first. Apple calls this quick take. If you want to capture a longer video, then drag the shutter right onto the lock. Now the iPhone will continue recording, even if you release the shutter button. While recording, you can also continue to take pictures by tapping on the shutter button that appears on the right. And here on the left, you can pause and resume the recording. You can also start capturing a quick take video by pressing and holding one of the 2 volume buttons. Now let's take a look at the zoom and the lenses. Above the menu bar, you can see a small 1x. It is yellow. This means that the main camera is currently active. By tapping on the 0.5 to the left of it, you activate the ultra-wide camera, and via the 5 the camera with the telephoto lens. However, the latter is only available on the 2 Pro models. The 2X does not stand for a 4th camera. It's a digital crop of the main camera. And this is made possible by the high-resolution 48-megapixel sensor of the main camera. And the high-resolution sensor also makes another feature possible. If you tap on the one, you can activate a focal length of 28mm, that is 1.2x, and 35mm, that is 1.5x. Yes, and this is also a digital crop, but similar to the case of the 2x zoom, there is hardly any loss of quality compared to the native focal length of 1x, certainly also because the images are digitally processed again. The default field of view of the main camera is relatively wide at 24mm, or 1x. If you prefer that the main camera is set to 1.2x or 1.5 by default when you start the camera app, you can set it in the settings of the camera app under Fusion Camera and Default Lens. This is a very useful option because, for example, 35mm, which is 1.5x, is considered the most flexible focal length to use. When choosing a lens, One thing should be clear to you, even if it does not look like this on the display, the different lenses have different technical properties. The main camera produces less distortions than the ultra-wide camera, and it has the largest aperture. It can therefore achieve better results in low light conditions. The telephoto lens produces the least amount of distortions and is therefore best suited for portraits. However, it has the smallest aperture and therefore achieves the worst results in low light. If you now tap and hold one of the numbers, a kind of zoom slider appears and you can swipe left and right to zoom in and out more precisely. For this tutorial, I use an iPhone 16 Pro, so you can see 0.5, 1, 2, 5 and 25 as numbers. The iPhone 16 and 16 Plus have only a 10 times digital zoom range. These numbers, of course, stand for the different cameras of your iPhone. If the quality of your photos is important to you, you should avoid a zoom factor between the numbers. And you should also avoid a zoom factor above 5, because in all these cases, it results in a digital crop of the image. You can also zoom in and out by using 2 fingers. In this case, you can always read the current zoom factor here. When you capture a picture with your iPhone, you will of course determine the framing on the display. So what should be on the picture? How should the picture composition look like? Basically, the framing of your picture will correspond to this outer frame. In many cases, you can also see the area outside this frame. This succeeding part is slightly darkened. It is supposed to help you to find the right framing, but it's not captured. For the right composition, the grid also helps you. So you can stick to the rule of thirds, for example, which is important for a good composition. And this white line is supposed to help you keep your iPhone straight when taking a photo and avoid a crooked horizon. It appears when you rotate your iPhone. As soon as the line turns yellow, you can be sure that the horizon is straight. You can activate and deactivate the grid, the level, and also the dimmed area outside the frame in the settings. In addition to the right framing, focus and exposure are crucial for a good photo. The iPhone's camera sets focus and exposure automatically and does an excellent job. Faces are recognized perfectly. You can see this by the yellow frame that appears when the camera detects a face. And actually with the iPhone, you can also get a blurred background or a foreground naturally. For example, when you capture objects in the near foreground and the background is far away. So it's quite possible that certain areas of the image are in focus and others are not. Therefore, it can sometimes be necessary to adjust the focus manually. You do this by tapping on the object or person in the image that should be in focus. Now your iPhone also adjusts the exposure to the new focus. You can also correct the exposure manually. You do this by tapping on the sun next to the focus square and by swiping up or down. Upwards, the image becomes brighter. Downwards, it becomes darker. You can also lock the focus and the exposure. Suppose you set the focus and/or the exposure manually and want them to stay locked even when you move the phone. You can do this by tapping and holding on the appropriate area. Now the AEAF lock sign appears in yellow at the top. You can now move your phone without changing focus and exposure. This can be very useful, for example, if you want to change the framing after setting the focus. The ultra-wide camera of the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro has a very special feature. It can focus extremely close. Apple calls this macro mode because by getting very close, you can capture small subjects greatly magnified. You don't need to have the ultra-wide camera activated for this. The iPhone automatically switches to macro mode when the distance to an object becomes less than 14 centimeters. So if the ultra-wide camera is not active, the iPhone automatically switches from the main camera or the telephoto lens to the ultra-wide camera. You will notice this when there are strange image jumps. This happens automatically. If you want to have more control over the macro mode, you can activate the macro control feature in the settings of the camera app. Now, whenever the macro mode is active, a yellow flower appears at the bottom left. By tapping on the flower, you can now also deactivate the macro mode. Personally, I think that the macro mode is a great feature. You should try it out. The results are amazing. Apart from these basic features, there are a few additional settings and features. To use them, you have to open an additional menu. You do this by using the arrow at the top in the middle or by slightly swiping up with your finger. Instead of the different shooting modes, you will now see a series of icons that stand for different features. The icons at the top of the screen indicate which of these features is currently active. On the far left, you will find the flash. You can set it to automatic, on or off. Notice how the flash symbol at the top of the screen changes. If it is very dark, the symbol for the night mode appears right next to it. To show you this, I hold my hand in front of the lens. The night mode will dramatically change the results in low light conditions. Normally, the night mode will activate automatically when it is very dark. When the yellow night mode icon appears at the top, you know that the night mode is now active. In night mode, your iPhone uses longer exposure times. Depending on how dark it is, your iPhone will need a shorter or longer exposure time to get a good result. You can see the duration of the automatically set exposure time right next to the icon. For example, 1 or 2 seconds. During the exposure, you should hold your iPhone as still as possible. Above the shutter button, a timer appears, which counts down the remaining time. If you shake or move the iPhone, the device will recognize this and 2 crosshairs will appear, one yellow and one white. You should move the iPhone in a way that the yellow crosshair lies directly on top of the white one. This helps to reduce movements and you can get a better result. You can also change the exposure time yourself by tapping on the night mode icon and moving the slider to the left or right. By moving the slider all the way to the left, you can also disable the night mode. A longer exposure time will not lead to a brighter result, but it could lead to better image quality. It makes sense to increase the exposure time when your iPhone is on a tripod. There will be no movement and you can achieve optimal results. However, if you want to adjust the exposure and brightness of the image when the night mode is active, you can do this by moving the sun icon up or down. By the way, if you are interested in which mini tripods or other accessories I use for my iPhone, check out the links in the video description. The next icon to the right refers to live photos, one of my favorite iPhone photo features. Here too, the automatic is normally active. You can also turn live photos on or off permanently here. With live photos, your iPhone captures a clip of 1.5 seconds before and after the photo was taken. Therefore, a short video clip of 3 seconds is created. You can watch this mini clip by tapping and holding on the screen while viewing your photo. You can change the so-called key photo within your clip, and you can also add cool effects to your live photo. It's very easy to do. To add effects, you open your live photo and tap on the live icon in the upper left corner. You can also add a loop to repeat your shot continuously, or bounce to repeat your shot alternately forwards and backwards. I find long exposure especially interesting. This simulates a long exposure. It works well with moving lights or for example with water. If you tap on the settings icon at the bottom and then on the live icon, you can also change the key photo and shorten the duration of the shot. It can be extremely useful to change the key photo. For example, if your subject has closed his or her eyes in the previous key photo. We will take a look at the other editing features later. You can tell that your iPhone is capturing a live photo by the yellow live icon at the top of the screen. And this icon stands for the Photographic Styles. This feature has been significantly revised for the iPhone 16, and since it can be an extremely useful feature, we should take a very close look at it. The Photographic Styles are not to be confused with filters. In its default setting, the iPhone produces a relatively natural look that is relatively close to reality. Other smartphone manufacturers, for example, prefer a more vivid look with more saturation or more contrast. With the Photographic Styles, you can now change the general look of your iPhone photos. Unlike a filter, it does not simply apply a color to the whole image. Photographic Styles adjust specific colors in certain parts of your photos to create the exact look you want. And unlike with older iPhone models, the iPhone 16 allows you to change and customize the photographic style even after the photo has been taken. There are basically 2 types of styles: undertones, which mainly influence the undertone of the skin, and mood styles, which give the whole image a special look. Undertones include cool rose, neutral, rose gold or amber, while under mood you will find, for example, vibrant or dramatic, cozy or stark black and white for a very high contrast black and white photo. You can use the slider at the bottom to adjust the intensity of the effect, whereby the effect is neutralized, at least as far as the color is concerned, if you drag the slider all the way to the left. You can then make further adjustments using the field in the center. To put it simply, the further you drag the slider to the right, the more saturated the effect becomes. If you drag it upwards, parts of the image are brightened and the contrast is reduced. If you drag it downwards, the image appears darker and the contrast is increased. One thing should be clear: the style remains active for a certain time, but is then reset to default. For example, when the iPhone is restarted. So if some of your photos look a bit strange, This could be due to an unintentionally active photographic style, and Apple has come up with a guide to help you find your ideal style and set it as the new standard. When you open the settings of the camera app, you can select 4 photos under Photographic Styles, ideally photos that have different subjects, and can now see at a glance what effects the respective photographic style has on your photos. You can then select your favorite style, adjust it if necessary, and save it as the new default. This allows you to define your own personal style for your iPhone photos. However, only the undertones are available here in the settings. And as I said, if you don't like a photo with a certain style, you can now, in contrast to older iPhones, open the photo and adjust the photographic style later via the settings and styles. A very cool new feature. With the icon to the right of the photographic styles, you can change the aspect ratio of your photos. A normal photo sensor delivers the photo in a 4:3 format. You can also set a square aspect ratio or a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is more typical for video recordings. You should not forget that you can also change the aspect ratio when editing your photos. Right next to it, there is a very important feature, the exposure slider. With this feature, you can make your image brighter or darker. That means you can overexpose or underexpose your image a little bit in relation to the settings of the automatic exposure. And this for a maximum of 2 stops. But wait, wasn't there already the sun icon for that? Yes, but with the exposure slider, you can make smaller and more precise adjustments, and you have a little more control. In addition, the exposure correction will be kept and will stay the same if you take more photos. I have to say that the automatic of the iPhone protects so-called highlights very well, and there are hardly any overexposed areas in the pictures. So for such cases, you hardly need any exposure correction. It's more that you might want to capture a darker or brighter image to create a certain mood. For example, many people believe that the iPhone exposes the images too brightly and prefer a slightly negative value here. The next icon is a timer. This allows you to set that the image is not taken until 3, 5 or 10 seconds after pressing the shutter button. This can be useful if you want to take a group selfie and place your iPhone on a tripod, or in low light with longer exposures to avoid any shaking. Before we take a look at the portrait mode, I would just like to point out that basically the same features are available when using the selfie camera. For example, there is also the night mode or the live photo mode. What there is not is a real zoom feature. You can only slightly zoom in or out by tapping the 2 arrows or by using 2 fingers. It's also interesting that the selfie camera shows you a mirrored image in the preview, but captures the image without mirroring it. The picture then looks different from the preview. If this bothers you, you can change this in the settings. When capturing selfies, remember that you can use the volume buttons as shutter. This is especially useful here. If we now switch to portrait mode, we find the usual settings for flash, eventually the night mode, aspect ratio, photographic styles, exposure correction and timer in the menu. Live photo is not available. However, there are 2 new settings here. Different portrait lighting effects, which you can select here by swiping to the left and right, and the f-stop, or depth control as Apple calls it. As explained in the beginning, in portrait mode, your iPhone creates a blurred background, as if you had taken the picture with a mirrorless or DSLR and a very fast lens. In general, the smaller the number of the f-stop, the stronger the effect will be. That means the blurrier the background will be. The bigger the number, the smaller the effect will be, just like it would be on a bigger camera. Basically, the feature works incredibly well. Only in very small details, such as protruding hairs, can you sometimes spot imperfections. As already mentioned, the portrait mode also works with objects, but especially with objects, you have to make sure that there is an appropriate distance between camera and object to activate the feature. The camera tells you this at the top of the screen. And portrait lighting is also a great feature. It's designed to simulate professional lighting techniques. If you've been into photography, you'll know that good lighting often makes a bigger difference than the actual camera. You can select different lighting effects by swiping to the left and right. You can also see the effect in the preview. With Studio Light, the face is well exposed by a soft light. It reminds you of a beauty filter. With Contour Light, the external areas of the face or the object are darkened a bit. This gives the picture a little more depth and drama. With Stage Light, the subject is isolated in the spotlight. The outer area is completely darkened. Stage Light Mono creates the same effect in black and white, and High Key Light Mono does not darken but lightens the outer area. For example, like a portrait against a white background. If you find the effect exaggerated or too weak, you can adjust the intensity. In the menu, tap on the portrait lighting icon And now you can adjust the effect by dragging the slider to the left or right. Also note that you can change and adjust the portrait lighting and f-stop when editing your portrait. And not only that, when you edit your portrait, you can even move the focus point using the yellow frame. Here on the left, you can also switch between the main camera, the 2x crop and the telephoto lens on the 16 Pro and Pro Max. For best results of close-ups of faces, I recommend using the telephoto lens. And there's something else you should know. If you are in the normal photo mode and your iPhone recognizes a face, an F icon appears at the bottom left. This means you can activate the portrait feature in normal photo mode with a simple tap and don't have to switch to portrait mode. And you can even activate the portrait feature when editing the photo. It's only important that your iPhone has detected a face when taking the picture. By the way, this also works with dogs and cats. With the panorama mode, you can capture an extremely wide field of view. As the name suggests, this is great for capturing landscapes or cityscapes. Because of the ultra-wide lens, this feature may have lost some of its importance. Nevertheless, it still produces results that would not be possible with a simple shot. Basically, several images are combined. To do this, start recording and move your camera along the arrow from left to right. If you tap on the arrow, you can also change the direction and capture the panorama from right to left. Make sure that the arrow is moving along the yellow line during the recording. If you do not succeed, you will see unsightly waves in the image. Apart from that, there are hardly any settings in this mode. You can change the lens and that's it. Now that we've learned about most of the features of the camera app, it's time to take a closer look at the camera control button. And the button has some very interesting features. As mentioned at the beginning, you can use it to open the camera app. When the camera app is open, you can take a photo or start and stop a video with a single press. If you press and hold the button in photo mode, you can record a quick capture video, similar to the capture button of the app. But that's not all. The brilliant thing is that if you swipe with light pressure up or down on the button, or to the left or right, depending on how you hold the iPhone, you can change various settings. As you can see, I changed the exposure by swiping up and down, just like with the exposure control feature. You can also change other settings with the camera control button. To do this, lightly press the button twice and a menu will appear. You can now select the feature you want to adjust by swiping. In addition to the exposure, you can change the f-stop for portrait shots, the zoom factor, whereby the zoom for all values between the various cameras leads to a digital crop and a reduction in image quality. This is why it's also possible to switch only between the cameras, which is clearly the better option. At the bottom, you can change the styles and even adjust the tone of your style. And with new updates, Apple is sure to add even more features to the camera control button. The button is a very cool new feature, but in my opinion, it has one disadvantage. It has happened to me several times that I have unintentionally changed settings by holding the iPhone with my thumb, especially when the exposure control is active. This can unintentionally ruin your photos. I therefore usually leave the button on camera as the default setting. And another thing, when you change settings with the camera control button, all other information disappears from the screen, so you can better assess the effects on your photo. Apple calls this clean preview. You can deactivate this feature in the settings of the camera app. As you can see here, you can also use the camera control button to open other apps that have access to the camera. You can set it to open Instagram, for example, if you frequently take photos with the Instagram app. Now let's have a quick look at the editing tools. If you tap on a small image of your last shot in the lower left corner, you will see your last image in full size and can edit it in many different ways. Today, I will only give you a brief overview and point out a few important things. If you swipe through your last photos, you can see in the upper left corner if your photo is a portrait photo or a live photo. If not, this area remains blank. This is important because portrait photos and live photos allow different editing steps. Generally, the editing menu opens by pressing the settings button here below. As already explained, here you can subsequently change or customize the style used. With the adjust icon, you can make basic adjustments to the photo. You can adjust the colors, exposure, white balance, saturation, sharpness, and so on. And by clicking the icon on the right, you can rotate, crop, or adjust the aspect ratio of the photo. Via the pen icon, you can add markups, sticker, text, and so on. What is missing in my case is the cleanup feature, which allows you to remove objects from a picture with a few taps using AI. Well, that's because the feature is not yet available here in Italy. So in the EU, if your shot is a portrait as mentioned before, You can use the editing tools to change the portrait lighting and the depth of field, that is the f-stop. Now let's have a look at the most important settings of the camera app. With pre-served settings, you can, for example, set the camera to remember certain settings. For example, you always want to use the same photographic style, the same exposure correction, or you always want to start the app in video mode. Then you can enable here that the app remembers your settings. The camera of your iPhone can automatically detect text, and you can then copy and edit this text. You don't even have to take a photo for that. When your iPhone detects a text, you can see this by the yellow borders and the small text icon. If you tap on the text icon, you can select parts of the detected text, copy it, use it for a search, translate it, or even share it. This feature can be very useful. If you don't need it, you can deactivate it here in the settings. The ultra-wide lens and the front camera create unattractive distortions. They are automatically corrected and removed. You can also disable this feature here. Now a few very important settings. Under Formats, you can choose between high efficiency and most compatible. If high efficiency is activated, your iPhone saves the photos in the HEIF format. This saves a lot of storage space, and the quality is said to be even better than that of a JPEG file. However, older computers and operating systems cannot handle this format. In this case, your iPhone will convert the files into a JPEG file when you transfer them. If you want to save the photos in the JPEG format already on your iPhone, then choose Most Compatible. The main camera of your iPhone has a sensor with 48 megapixels. Nevertheless, to save storage space in the default settings, the photos are saved in a resolution of 12 megapixels. If you often want to view your photos on a larger screen, you can set a higher default resolution of 24 megapixels here. I would definitely recommend this. And you can also save your photos in the full resolution of 48 megapixels. To do this, activate ProRaw and Resolution Control. HEIF is used as the standard format here as well. But be careful, according to Apple itself, the 48 megapixel photos have more resolution, but they also lose dynamic range. So for a better dynamic range, you should better take photos with 24 megapixels. If, on the other hand, you want to edit your photo heavily and therefore want to save as much information as possible in the photo file, then you should activate Apple ProRAW. The photos require considerably more storage space, but contain more information for editing. If you use ProRAW, you have the choice between JPEG lossless, JPEG XL lossless, and JPEG XL Lossy. JPEG Lossless generates the largest files, but is supported by more devices and platforms. JPEG XL, on the other hand, generates smaller files, whereby JPEG XL Lossy in particular results in significantly smaller files, but also in a slightly reduced quality. This feature is only available on the Pro models. Whether in ProRAW or HEIF, high-resolution 48 megapixel photos can only be taken with the 1x main camera and the 0.5 ultra-wide camera. In addition, you always have to activate the feature in the camera app as well. And with this, I want to say goodbye for today. If the video was interesting or helpful for you, give me a like as feedback. If you want to support this channel, you can use the link in the video description to buy me a coffee. If you want to learn even more about how to get the best results with your iPhone camera, check out my tutorials on iPhone photography or editing photos on the iPhone. You can also find a list of my best iPhone camera tutorials in the video description. There will be more videos about the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, so stay tuned and see you next time.